The silence of the corporate parking lot was shattered by a child's voice, sharp and urgent. "Shut up and don't say a word." Jonathan Miller froze, his keys suspended halfway to the door of his black BMW. The voice had come from inside his own car. As his eyes adjusted to the dim interior, he discovered a small black girl, perhaps 7 years old, huddled in the back seat like a frightened animal. Her clothes were dirty, her eyes wide with terror, but there was something else there, a fierce intelligence that seemed far too old for her young face. "They're listening," she whispered, nodding toward the gleaming corporate building behind him. "Your partner and his blonde assistant. They said you'd be here right now." Jonathan Miller, at 52, had built Miller Industries from nothing into a $200 million technology empire. He had trusted Marcus Williams completely for 15 years, and Diana Foster had been his right hand for a decade. Never in his wildest imagination had he thought his carefully constructed world would be turned upside down by a street child. "How did you get into my car?" he asked quietly, sliding into the driver's seat without making sudden movements that might startle her further. The girl, who called herself Jasmine, explained that the cleaning lady had left the car unlocked, and she'd hidden inside after overhearing a conversation that chilled her to the bone. "They said that tomorrow you won't own anything anymore," she whispered, her small voice carrying the weight of adult concerns. The blonde woman laughed and said that the day after tomorrow you'll be looking for another job. Jonathan's blood turned to ice. Tomorrow was the crucial meeting with Japanese investors, a $400 million merger that Marcus and Diana had orchestrated with meticulous care. As he pretended to fiddle with his phone while watching the illuminated windows of the 10th floor, Jasmine continued her devastating revelation. "They said you're stupid and you're going to sign papers without reading them. The blonde woman said you trust them like an obedient little dog, and that little dogs sometimes bite their owners." The casual cruelty of those words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. 15 years of partnership, 10 years of absolute trust, and they saw him as nothing more than a foolish pet to be manipulated and discarded. But as he looked at this brave child who had risked her safety to warn a complete stranger, he felt something stir within him, a mixture of rage and, surprisingly, hope. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jasmine," she replied. "And yours is Jonathan Miller, because I heard them say it 1,000 times. Are you going to turn me into the police now?" For the first time in weeks, Jonathan smiled genuinely. "No, Jasmine. In fact, you may have saved everything I've built in my life." As they drove through the quiet city streets, Jonathan learned that this remarkable child lived nowhere in particular. Sometimes at shelters, sometimes on the streets, wherever there was space and the other children weren't too troublesome. When he asked why she had warned him, her answer revealed a wisdom that humbled him. "Because I know what it's like when people think you're invisible. My grandma always said, when you see someone getting stepped on and you can help, you help because next time it could be you." In an all-night diner, over hamburgers and cold coffee, Jonathan began to understand the full scope of the betrayal. His phone buzzed with messages from Marcus and Diana, friendly, concerned, dripping with false affection. Marcus wrote about how the Japanese would love their proposal, how Jonathan would retire rich. Diana assured him the contracts were perfect, urging him to trust me as you always have. Each message felt like a knife twisted in his back, but Jasmine's presence gave him clarity he hadn't felt in months. "They know everything about you, don't they?" Jasmine observed, licking ketchup from her fingers. "Bank passwords, company accounts, where you keep important documents." Jonathan nodded grimly, realizing the full magnitude of his vulnerability. But then Jasmine asked a question that changed everything. "But you've had years of stuff on them too, right?" Suddenly, Jonathan saw the situation differently. 15 years of partnership meant 15 years of shared secrets. He knew about Marcus's clandestine meetings with competitors, Diana's suspicious bonus system she'd created for herself, the conversations he'd overheard when they thought he wasn't paying attention. The next morning brought a message from Diana at 6:15 a.m. "Good morning, boss. I've been at the office since 5 o'clock getting everything ready. You just need to trust me and sign where I tell you, as always." The same woman who had worked overtime to ensure his destruction was still playing the devoted assistant. When Jonathan asked Jasmine to return to the building to gather more intelligence, she agreed without hesitation, understanding the danger, but willing to face it. Jonathan contacted Gabriel Torres, a private investigator he had worked with before. a man who had been mysteriously let go by Marcus and Diana the previous year under the guise of budget cuts. Now Jonathan understood the real reason. Gabriel was too smart and asked too many inconvenient questions. When Gabriel arrived at Jonathan's house, he brought devastating news that went far beyond simple betrayal. Marcus and Diana aren't just traitors, he explained, spreading documents across the kitchen table. They're thieves. The evidence was overwhelming. Suspicious transfers, fake contracts, phantom clients that existed only on paper. For 2 years, they had systematically embezzled over $5 million from the company, creating a complex network of shell companies to launder the money. The merger with the Japanese wasn't about growth. It was about legitimizing their thefts. They needed Jonathan's signature to validate retroactive transfers, after which they planned to remove him and walk away clean. As Jonathan absorbed this information, his phone rang again. Marcus's voice was sickeningly cheerful. "I hope you slept well. Diana and I have been here since early morning, finalizing the last details. The Japanese are going to be impressed with our organization." Then came the ultimate insult. "Diana suggested you don't need to worry about reviewing the documents today. They're quite technical, and you've always trusted our expertise, right? Just show up and sign where she tells you to." Gabriel presented Jonathan with 2 options. Call the police immediately and risk that Marcus and Diana might escape on technicalities, or let them hang themselves by walking into the meeting as the predator they never imagined he could be. Jasmine clapped her hands with excitement, her eyes shining with the thrill of justice about to be served. "Like in the movies, you pretend you're going to sign, but you already know everything." The plan took shape with military precision. Gabriel would present the evidence, federal investigators would be standing by, and Jasmine, despite Jonathan's initial reluctance to involve a child, would serve as their secret weapon, recording everything from her hiding place. As they prepared for the confrontation, Jonathan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the intoxicating thrill of the hunt. Marcus and Diana had spent 2 years building their perfect trap, never suspecting that it would become their own cage. At exactly 2 o'clock the following afternoon, Jonathan entered the Miller Industries conference room, as if it were just another ordinary business day. Marcus and Diana were already there, arranging documents with surgical precision, their faces glowing with barely contained triumph. Marcus embraced him like a brother, while Diana approached with her leather briefcase and that familiar, condescending smile that now made Jonathan's skin crawl. "Boss, you just need to sign where I marked with yellow post-its," she said in that motherly tone she had perfected over the years. "Trust me, as you always have." But instead of reaching for a pen, Jonathan connected his laptop to the conference room projector. "Sure," he said calmly, "but first, I wanted to show you something interesting I discovered last night." Gabriel Torres entered carrying a box of files, followed by 2 federal investigators. The color drained from Marcus's face as the screen filled with detailed spreadsheets showing every fraudulent transaction, every fake company, every stolen dollar. $5,300,000 embezzled over 2 years, Jonathan announced matter-of-factly. 17 shell companies created to launder the money you stole from me. Diana's composure cracked first, her hands trembling as she clutched her briefcase. "Jonathan, what is this? Some kind of joke?" But Gabriel was already distributing evidence to the investigators, recordings of Marcus and Diana planning the fraudulent merger, confessions from phantom clients they had invented, bank records that painted a picture of systematic theft and deception. Marcus's mask of charm finally slipped completely. "You can't prove anything," he snarled, his face red with panic and rage. "These are just accusations." That's when the conference room door opened and 7-year-old Jasmine walked in, accompanied by a social worker. Her eyes sparkled with determination as she approached the table and addressed Marcus directly. "Hi, Mr. Marcus. Remember me? I was hiding under your desk last night when you called Mr. Yamamoto, telling him you were going to steal Mr. Jonathan's company." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air, unable to form words. Diana made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "A child? You're going to believe a street kid over respected professionals?" Gabriel's response was to press play on his phone, filling the room with Diana's voice in crystal clarity. "Jonathan is a sentimental idiot. The day after tomorrow, he'll have to look for another job and we'll get everything. That clown will never know what hit him." Marcus's voice followed. 15 years pretending to be friends with that imbecile? It'll be worth every second when I see his face when he finds out he's lost everything. As the handcuffs clicked around their wrists, Marcus shouted threats and curses, while Diana wept silently. Jonathan felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only a profound sense of justice finally being served. In the months that followed, the full scope of Marcus and Diana's crimes came to light. They had defrauded 7 other businessmen over 5 years, creating a criminal enterprise far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Marcus received 12 years in prison, Diana 8. Their assets were seized, their reputations destroyed, their carefully constructed lives reduced to rubble. But for Jonathan, the real transformation was just beginning. Miller Industries, freed from the parasites that had been draining its resources, grew by 40% within 6 months. More importantly, Jasmine had become a permanent part of his life. He enrolled her in private school, watched her excel academically, and he marveled at how quickly she adapted to her new circumstances while never losing the street-smart wisdom that had saved them both. 3 months after the arrests, Jonathan made a discovery that changed everything he thought he knew about fate and coincidence. While reviewing Jasmine's background for the adoption paperwork, he uncovered a stunning connection. Jasmine's grandmother, Josephine Miller, was his father's brother's daughter, a cousin the family had lost contact with over 30 years ago. The girl who had saved his company wasn't just a stranger with a good heart. She was family, guided by instincts she didn't fully understand, to protect one of her own. The adoption ceremony took place in the same courthouse where Marcus and Diana had been convicted. Jasmine, now legally Jasmine Miller, wore a light blue dress and held Jonathan's hand tightly as the judge signed the final documents. It's rare to see a story that begins with crime and ends with a family reunited, the judge observed with a smile. Years later, as Miller Industries became one of the country's 100 largest technology companies, Jonathan established a scholarship program for vulnerable children, funding education and housing for over 200 children annually. Jasmine, now 12 and serving as the program's honorary president, continued to amaze him with her wisdom and compassion. "Do you know what the best day of my life was?" she asked during the program's anniversary dinner. "The day I got in your car and decided to trust you. Because that day I wasn't just saving your company, I was saving our family." Jonathan realized that Marcus and Diana, in their greed and betrayal, had inadvertently given him the greatest gift of his life, the chance to discover that family isn't just blood, but courage, loyalty, and unconditional love. He had learned that true victory isn't about destroying your enemies, but about building something so beautiful and powerful that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in why. Our success story. Marcus and Diana had tried to steal his company, but ended up giving him something far more valuable. A daughter, a purpose, and proof that sometimes the universe uses the most unlikely people to deliver exactly what we need, precisely when we need it most.